Bro, ever since Title Update 2.5 dropped, Charge Blade users have been moving a whole lot differently. And can you really blame them? Charge Blade just got massive buffs, and these monsters are not ready to duck the fade that's coming. Amped Elemental Discharges now deal higher raw damage, Power Axe multi-hits hit harder, and Phial explosions finally scale correctly. With changes like this, you'll be straight moonwalking on tempered monsters from new Udra, Arkveld, and anyone else who wants to smoke, bro. Let's break it all down and figure out why Charge Blade just went from niche to top tier overnight. Thank you, Capcom. Alright, so here's the table of contents. If you just want to skip to the build, go to the timestamp below. However, if you're new to Charge Blade, I highly recommend watching the combo tutorial so you can understand what exact moves we're using to fight these monsters. Alright, let's start with our offensive skills. First is Critical Boost. Every amped elemental discharge that you land benefits from Critical Boost. Since your entire rhythm revolves around chaining amped elemental discharges, this skill guarantees that when you land those slams, they hit at maximum potential. The next decoration is Water Attack. Running a Water Element Charge Blade with Elemental Phials makes Water Attack one of the best payoff skills you can slot. The skill raises your Water Element stat, which directly boosts your amped Elemental Discharge explosions. Against water-weak monsters like new Udra, the extra elemental scaling pushes your DPS into overdrive. Since we're getting Water Attack from our Talisman, it fits perfectly into this build without taking away from other core skills. The next decoration is Weakness Exploit. When your amped elemental discharge loop lands on weak zones, Weakness Exploit ensures those hits crit reliably. Pair with Critical Boost, and suddenly every slam in your rotation becomes guaranteed high value damage instead of a dice roll. The only thing you're going to be gambling is when you use your AED. Since Charge Blade doesn't consume stamina heavily during your loop, you're usually at full stamina. Maximum Might gives you nearly free affinity throughout your amped elemental discharge chain, stacking crit consistently on top of Weakness Exploit. Next is Coalescence. When you recover from a blight, Coalescence boosts your elemental damage and status buildup. In status heavy fights, this turns your amped elemental discharge chain into a spike of elemental output that can swing the entire hunt. To complement Coalescence, we're running Antivirus 3. This gives us 10% affinity after recovering from a blight, and on top of that, it makes sure we recover from Frenzy faster. The next active skill we have is Burst. Burst increases both raw and elemental damage after chaining attacks. At level 2, once you land 5 hits, you gain plus 10 raw and plus 80 elemental attack, which feeds directly into your amped elemental discharge loop. Since Charge Blade is constantly morphing and chaining hits, you'll keep this buff up nearly every rotation, turning each slam into a boosted nuke. Ideally, Burst 1 is more slot efficient, so we'll be looking to optimize for that in future setups. Finally, we have Load Shells 2, which expands your Phial capacity and allows red overcharge, giving you more fuel for each loop. It's essentially extra ammo for your AED chain, then you keep the rhythm going for longer before resetting. Altogether, these skills all work together to keep the Charge Blade loop running at max efficiency. Rapid Morph and Load Shells make the weapon flow, Crit Boost and Weakness Exploit make every hit count, while utility like Coalescence, Antivirus, and Burst keeps you dealing damage no matter what the monster throws at you. This next part is the main combat loop. We're gonna go through how to actually use this build. So here's the first step of the combat loop. But before I say anything, forget about the actual combos. I want you to pay attention to the philosophy of the weapon itself. So just try to understand the philosophy. So the first step is to build your Phials. Your first goal is to always charge your Phials to red. Here's how this setup works. Charge into sword, charged double slash. You do this by holding circle until your sword glows red, then release for a charged double slash. The follow-up is round slash. After the double slash, press triangle to perform a sword slash. Then repeat. Hold circle again until your sword glows red. Then release for another charged double slash. This sequence will get you from no Phials to red Phials. In the clip below, you can see me using the same sequence on new Udra. Now that we completed step 1, we're moving on to step 2, which is charging your shield. Pay close attention to this section because this is where things can get confusing. Just pay attention. Once your Phials are red, the next step is to charge your shield. You do this by pressing the guard button, then hold the circle button to perform shield element boost. When done correctly, your shield icon just underneath your sharpness bar will glow, confirming it's charged. So why is this important? Charging your shield unlocks several powerful buffs that directly boost your amp elemental discharge loop. First, it raises your guard level, making your shield stronger and your guard points safer. Second, it increases guard point strength overall. Third, it adds a small fall explosion when guarding. Fourth, it boosts the attack of all axe attacks by 10%. And 5, it extends shield duration with each Phial. You get 24 seconds per Phial, so up to 180 seconds, which is 3 minutes. Think of it like flipping the on switch for your charge blade. Without a charged shield, your amp elemental discharge loop is weaker and whiskier. With a charged shield, every slam is safer, stronger, and much harder for the monster to interrupt. So, do you see the build philosophy? The heart of Charge Blade is simple. We fulfill conditions to unlock temporary bursts of power. Charge Blade isn't just about raw numbers alone, it's about rhythm and timing. You build energy, store it, and release it in the right window. Every step of the loop stacks strength on top of strength, turning short temporary buffs into constant flow of damage. That's the philosophy. By meeting those conditions and keeping the cycle alive, you transform the weapon from clunky and situational into relentless, high-tempo damage machine. Next is step 3, charging your axe. So just to recap, we've learned how to build Phials and how to charge Phials. Now we're going to learn about how to charge your axe and get the axe buff. So there are a few ways to charge the axe and unlock the power axe buff, but for simplicity's sake, we'll focus on the easiest method, mounting. At the start of the quest, use your Sacred to perform multiple mounting attacks. Once you complete a mount finisher, your axe will automatically charge, activating the power axe buff. With power axe active, every axe swing adds chainsaw-like ticks to your damage. This buff lasts 120 seconds and stacks directly with your amped elemental discharge loop, making every slam deal even more damage. Think of it as your tempo engine. Shield charging gives you safety and raw power, while axe charging gives you sustained pressure. Together, they set the stage up for your main amped elemental discharge rotation. Alright, let's take a step back to review again. Are you seeing it? The philosophy of the weapon? We had to fulfill a completely different set of conditions just to unlock the axe buff. That's the core philosophy of this weapon. It isn't about memorizing endless combos. It's about understanding the conditions that give you power. Phials, shield, axe, each one asks for different things from you. In return, you get stronger, safer, and more explosive moves. So don't get caught up on the inputs just yet. Focus on the idea. Charge Blade rewards players who can juggle these conditions and keep them active. Once that clicks, the combos will flow naturally, I promise you. Okay, now let's continue. So everything we've done so far, charging Phials, charging the shield, charging the axe, it's all set up. And you might be asking, why are we buffing ourselves? For what? The answer is simple. To maximize the damage of our main combo loop. All those steps weren't about dealing damage directly. They were about stacking power, safety, and tempo so that when you finally enter into your main amped elemental discharge loop, every single slam cashes in for massive numbers. That's the philosophy of Charge Blade. Set up first, unleash later. The build isn't about random swings, it's about preparing your weapon so the real damage can flow. Now that we've finished the setup, let's move on to the section that actually kills the monster, the main combo loop. However, before we really get into the loop, there's just one thing we really need to confirm: the two types of charges. So before we jump into the main combo loop, you need to understand the two different types of charges. The first is shield charge. As you recall, you hold R2, which is the guard button, and you hold circle to perform shield elemental boost. This charges your shield, giving you extra guard strength, Phial explosions, and increased axe damage. The second type of charge is Phial overcharge, or normal charge. Instead of holding circle, just press circle after loading Phials. This doesn't charge your shield, it overcharges your Phials, turning them into ammunition for the main AED loop. It's crucial to understand the difference. Shield charge basically powers you up defensively and boosts your axe, while Phial overcharge fuels your offense, loading your weapon with explosive damage. Remember, the main loop we're about to learn spends those overcharged Phials. Make sure you're comfortable with both charges before moving on. And on top of that, messing up between the charges can lose you damage. So make sure you press and use the correct one during the appropriate time. Finally, the main AED loop, Amped Elemental Discharge Loop. Once your Phials are overcharged, you're ready to unleash the real power of Charge Blade and this build. Now, while in sword mode, start the loop with this: / into Shield's Thrust into Amped Elemental Discharge. The button input for this is very simple. Triangle plus circle 3 times in a row. / Shield Thrust and Amped Elemental Discharge have the same input. Triangle plus circle. If you're playing on another controller or like Xbox or PC, just use the appropriate input. Alright, so this sequence shifts you into axe mode and lets you tap into the weapon's highest burst potential. Every AED here caches in your overcharged Phials for explosive damage, stacking with all the buffs you built earlier. Don't rush through this part. Watch this combo carefully and get comfortable with the rhythm. Alright, so now that you understand the entry combo, let's expand into the next component of the loop. Starting from the top again. Sword / into Shield Thrust into Amped Elemental Discharge into Amped Elemental Discharge follow-up into Morph /. So now let's go over the inputs again. Again, sword / shield thrust and Amped Elemental Discharge. Those 3 attacks use the same input, triangle plus circle. You just press both of them at the same time. Amped Elemental Discharge follow-up is triggered by circle. So after your Amped Elemental Discharge, you press circle for the second, or like the follow-up. And then after that, press R2 to go into Morph /. This is very important because this is the most optimal loop. We're going to stop the axe combo and go straight back into the sword mode. Now, a special component about Morph / is that it allows you to go straight into shield thrust. So instead of having to do Morph / sword / shield thrust and then Amped Elemental Discharge, you just do Morph / shield thrust and then Amped Elemental Discharge. So after the Morph / just press triangle circle to get to shield thrust and then into Amped Elemental Discharge. And that's the entire loop, just over and over again. While you're in sword mode, if you want to like refill your Phials, just make sure you use the Phial building combo that I showed you before. Remember, hold circle, let it go, then hit triangle, then hold circle. Simple as that. Well guys, we made it. Here's the build. Take a screenshot or pause the video if you need to. Guys, thank you all for your support. It really means a lot. It really helps to just keep making these guides. And if you enjoyed the video, just don't forget to like, and if you want to see more Charge Blade content, make sure you subscribe. We're going to continue to cover all 14 weapons, and we're going to do the same thing whenever the DLC comes out. Just expect more builds. We are going to be doing some Borderlands builds once Borderlands 4 comes out, so if you play that game, just stay tuned. But regardless of that, we're still going to be making Monster Hunter videos even when we're going to be covering Borderlands, so don't worry about that. Anyways, have a good day. I hope you have fun.